an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Time of Contempt, Chapter 7, the final chapter. In this chapter, Ciri got scooped up by a knight who promptly kills a mortal enemy and winds up dead himself. And his dudes carry her off until another confrontation in which she finally winds up joining a gang. This makes total sense. Also, yikes. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Melanie, who is in the chat right now, for commissioning this episode. Melanie commissioned this whole book. This is kind of a brutal chapter. I've said before how odd it has been the way that the first book ended in a place that felt not really like, it's not even like it was a bad ending. It was just, there was so much left to figure out and talk about that I didn't feel like it prepared for the ending, I guess. But this book feels like it ended in a way that makes sense to me. And there is a real transition here into a different type of life for Ciri. And I'm extremely interested in how she's going to take to this mentally. Because, we hear reports of what's going on, of her having joined up later and her working in tandem with all of them, and how she's really adopted the same attitude and MO that these people, or the original Rat Pack, lol, had. But in her brain, what's going on? You know what I mean? Does she sleep well at night? Does she feel like I'm doing what I should be doing? Does she feel satisfied with the way that, there is an indication at the end of her POV section that leads me to think that she does sleep well at night because she is with people that seemingly will have her back. But she had only killed one person by then and had done it in a flurry of self-defense. And that's different than going into these raids that they're doing intending to kill people. And I'm extremely, I'm worried about her becoming so complacent with killing in this way. Melanie commented, Natasha sighs with the weight of all the things. Yeah, indeed. So I'm going to back up here. Chapter 7 starts off with a couple of these, I don't even know what to call them, henchmen, I guess, arguing about where it is that Ciri actually came from. Because they're trying to say that one of them is trying to say she crossed the frying pan, which is apparently what they call that desert. And the other dude is that's bullshit. There's nobody ever crosses that. There's no possible way. And they say that the evidence that they have is that there were horse hooves around her and that she was obviously riding. And that's why she managed to survive. And this is answering my question because I was really not sure what was going to happen with the unicorn once she got picked up. I figured that it would run away since it was since we read a whole thing about how they have to lure unicorns, that it wouldn't hang around once a bunch of random awful dudes turn up. But it turns out to vanish. And I'm wondering if that's going to come back again, if this is something that's was the unicorn actually for sure real? I think it was, but who knows, you know? And these guys are not sure why they picked her up. The main dude of this crew is called Skomlik, and he is the one that is sure she's not ordinary. Like, they keep on sort of being like, why did we track this bitch down? She's nothing. She's just a commoner. Look at how grubby she is. And Skomlik is just like, dude, there's no way that she's a regular person, because she would have been dead. So there's something going on. And it turns out that she hasn't actually spoken to anybody. She didn't, answer any questions about who she is or where she's from, which is smart, you know, like, if she had, then I guess the knight who knows full well who she is, and he's the one that's got, like, the plan in place, and he's just using these guys. If she had told the other guys, then they might not have handled her in the way that they did. They might have, like, headed straight for somebody that could have paid them, like, immediately, rather than trying to get her. I just think that they would have tried to get reinforcements of some kind, rather than continuing on by themselves and trying to take credit in the way that they were. But regardless, this knight is listening to all of them, like, sort of scrabbling with one another, and he tells them all to shut the fuck up, because one of them is threatening to whip her. And he tells them to go and get some work done, because you're obviously bored. I love this. He's treating them like little kids. Clearly you're bored, so why don't you clean your room, and you can do, you know. And these guys are clearly not thrilled with working for this dude, which becomes very clear later when this guy is injured and there is no, it's not even a question that they're going to try and help the guy out. They 100% see him go down and they're just like, well, and leave him there. And granted, it seems like his injuries were pretty bad, so he probably was dead. But, like, I love how they're not interested in getting his body back to anybody. They're not even worried about trying to, like, prove what happened. They are going to say, well, he ran into one of these guys and everybody knows they're mortal enemies and it's fine. And I just can't imagine having people that are, like, my servants, I guess, for lack of a better word, who are that willing to immediately throw me to the wolves. And I mean that in a very literal sense. But this entire time, I was a little bit worried about Ciri, because it turns out that I guess they see her as such a child that nobody is interested in raping her, but that doesn't usually, like, stop people. Let's be honest. So I had my eye out the whole time for wondering if they were going to do that. And it really looks like the only thing that keeps that from happening is the knight who, you know, is insisting that she be brought in unhurt. And Ciri is, like, finally starting to recover after several days of riding. And she starts testing out whether or not she has any magic left. And she doesn't. This is absolutely shocking to me. I didn't know when she said, take the power away, I don't want it, that she meant all of her magic altogether. I thought she was saying the fire magic that she had tapped into, that she was basically resigning herself to using only water magic, probably, or something. And instead, it looks like she has nothing left. It says, she cautiously tried the most simple spell, a mild telekinesis, but her fears were confirmed. She didn't have even a trace of magical energy. Having foolishly played with fire, her magical abilities had deserted her utterly. So, wow, I don't know what to think of this. Like, is this a permanent situation, or is it possible to get her power back? I just didn't know what she was agreeing to when she did that. It feels like she knew, and she sort of hoped that it wasn't true really, but that she was aware of what she was saying when she said it. But that is fucking harsh, man, you know, like, and the fire magic saved the unicorn, but it doesn't seem like it saved her. So, was it worth it? I mean, is this like a fairy tale where if you like, there's so many fairy tales where it's like, if you only have one loaf of bread left and you run into an old woman and you give her half your loaf of bread, then you wind up being like honored with some little talisman or spell or piece of advice or warning. And I'm wondering if what she did to help this unicorn heal will turn out to be something that comes back later as a sort of like, what I'm saying is I want something to make it worth it that she gave up her magic, because it doesn't feel worth it to me. No offense, unicorn, but like, who needs you? Nobody even knows you're out there. Get out of here. So yeah, this is really rough. So they're riding. Everything is pretty much like uneventful. She's not talking to anybody. She has the protection of this knight who doesn't want her to be harmed. And then they run into a knight in blue armor. And this guy is apparently from a family called Varnhagen. And immediately these two dudes face off with one another and clearly are not friends. And I thought that Blue Knight was the one that was going to... I thought that he was trying to take Ciri away. That he was under similar orders, that they were, you know, at odds with one another in what they were doing. And that he saw Ciri and was like, oh shit, no, she's ours. It turns out it's not even that deep. It's just that these two families hate each other. Like, I think Skolnick... Yeah, here it says, Skolnick says... There's an ancestral vendetta and blood feud between the Sweers and the Varnhagens. Like, that's insanity to me, that you hate another family so much that you run into somebody and you're in the middle of like a pretty big deal mission, right? Like, this dude he was given specific orders to grab this bitch and knows that he's getting a pretty good bounty. This other dude that he has run into, if he just declined to engage, probably wouldn't have like started shit if he didn't start shit back. And he could have just continued on with what he was doing and it would have been fine. But no, instead, they both act like fucking children. And it's so funny because Skomlik says something like, the benefits of this ruckus will come to us, not to their lordships. He fucking knows immediately that these idiots are going to do this. So what follows is this whole battle. I won't get into the ins and outs of it, but basically they both wind up dead. The Blue Knight goes down really hard and is trampled and is clearly, he has gotten the worst of it. But the Winged Knight is not in great shape either, and he winds up falling off his... And it's, let's see. The bay continued to trample the Blue Knight with such force that the wounded Winged Knight could not stay in the saddle and fell alongside him with a thud. And the Blue Knight servants were watching from a distance. One of them wheeled his horse around. Stop right there, Remiz, yelled Skomlik. Where are you going? To Sarda in a hurry to get to the gallows? The servants came to a halt. So these people wind up teaming up with them. Now, Ciri, for her part, is not about to just sit around and wait for these idiots to gather themselves back up and realize that she is still a valuable prize. She tries to steal a horse and run off. The thing is that Remiz, who is with the servants from Sarda who are with the Blue Knight, They are all on fresh horses. They clearly have not been like traveling for days. And they are, like close enough to her that it doesn't take much for them to catch up. She abandons the horse once they catch her on horseback and tries to just sprint, but they wind up catching her anyway. And what follows is another argument about who she is, about where she came from, and eventually it comes down to Skomlik saying, "We're going to Amarillo." Now, guys, you know what I'm going to say. We're going to Amarillo. Like, as a Texan, this is very, very difficult for me to read and not get distracted by. Amarillo is about 2 hours north of me, northwest. Yeah. And it is so funny to me how they have all of these other names that are just so, what's the word I want? They're so fantasy, And then to just have Amarillo, like the most hick name. I mean, I can't even think of another name that has, I'm sure somebody could come up with one, but like that is just so funny to me. I fell up short. I was just like, what? Are you serious? I'm sorry. Melanie is making a long comment here in the chat. Hold on. She says, "I always took this as a turning point for Ciri. She has been constantly told that she is powerful, that she's a chosen one of sorts. But by taking away her powers, she's taking destiny in her own hands. She makes a choice for herself, and we may find out later if it was a good choice and what it means, but it was her choice." Yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of, and I'll get there once we get to the gang thing, but that's part of what I want to talk about in terms of this feeling like more of an ending than the previous book. So she tries to get away and they snap her back up. They head into this town and she has been tied up so that she can't try and run again. And they come to this village and it used to be called White River. And it's been taken over by Nilfgaardian settlers. And the Nilfgaardians are very aggressive people. Like they came in and just murdered all of the villagers and took all of them prisoner. They used to be here. It's a pretty, I was actually thinking this the other day, and it's sort of funny because of how, first world my perspective is on this. But I was playing Skyrim with Owen, and, there are all these different sizes of villages that you come across in that game. There's occasionally a smattering of 2 or 3 houses. There's occasionally a house all by itself out in the middle of sort of nowhere. And then there's whole towns. There are actual cities. It's all very different, crowds of people and atmospheres and levels of military presence as well. And I was really struck by, even though it's just a game, how very sort of vulnerable everybody is in the world. We just take for granted that when we are in our homes, we are mostly safe. And I say take for granted with an asterisk. Women are more cautious because we feel like there could be somebody looking in our windows. There could be somebody who's lying and pretending to be somebody else at the door. Who knows? But in general, we feel pretty safe in our homes most of the time. When we feel unsafe, going home is our instinct in order to regain that feeling. And the idea that there used to exist a community that, and this is not long ago for even Americans, there used to exist a setup in villages where there weren't really necessarily any organized bodies looking out for people in general. You could have soldiers and magistrates and whatnot, but it was different. And we have police now, but police aren't just like patrolling around our neighborhoods all the time. You have to call them and hope they get to you before something happens to you. And the depth of vulnerability for people in an era like this, when not only are there no phones and no police to call, but even if there were, the chances of those police being as corrupt is, and this is true today as well, guys, just know this. It's really kind of gotten into my psyche how much less safe I feel in the world now than I did a few years ago when I really trusted that these systems were in place to protect me. Because I know better now. They're not in place to protect me. They're in place to protect other people. And the number of people of color or disabled people who have called police for help and wound up dead at the hands of the very people they called for assistance is staggering. And that's having police in the equation at all. This village had nobody, right? They just swept in, went into people's homes, killed them, and took their shit. And that was fine. And then they just settled there. This isn't even like the dignity of being killed and having your shit taken and then those people leaving and going back to their homes like Vikings, raiding. This is, they kick you out the door and go inside and sleep in your bed, which is just so insulting. Like, seriously, that's how I felt about this. I was just like, that's fucked up. That's straight up insulting. Ew. I hated it. I just can't get over this sort of existence when, nowadays, to a degree, one could call us more civilized. If that's true or not, that's very much up for debate. But an entire town being sort of like taken down and everybody just going on with their lives like, well, they won. What are you going to do? Fair and square. They won the town and we're just going to let them have it. That would not happen. And it's bonkers that this was a thing to me. So anyway, long story short, that's crazy town. And I really understand why Skamlik, or Remiz is the one. Skamlik is the one that doesn't really get it. But Remiz is very reticent to try and come in here the way that Skamlik wants to, which is basically acting like we own the place. Remiz is like, these people are not to be fucked with, dude. They aren't a bunch of little villagers with no idea how to handle weapons or anything. These are Nilfgaardians who just killed an entire village of people. They will kill us. Don't press them, But of course, Skamlik doesn't really want to hear this. So they push into town, and Skamlik makes this whole story up to one of the front guards about how he is there in service of the prefect of Amarillo. Now, if it wasn't bad enough that they are heading for Amarillo, they're working for a prefect. I don't get it, y'all. I don't understand titles or how any of this works. It is, what? Guys, the prefect of Amarillo? This sounds like a Mad Libs. What is happening? So yeah, Skamlik tells this dude, and the person that he's speaking to, the settler, lets him come in, but it's really clear from the look on his face and the way he eyeballs them that he's not 100% buying this story. He's just kind of like, all right, we'll let you in, but the truth is, I don't believe you, and if you start any trouble, we will handle it. Don't doubt that. And it doesn't feel like Skamlik really gets the message. He really seems to think, oh, see, no problem. They totally bought this bullshit story. Did they though? Or are they just letting you hang yourself? And that turns out to be kind of what happens. So they head into this inn, which they've been told is about to be taken down, apparently, because these Nilfgaardians are like, oh yeah, we don't need the inn because it brings nothing but strangers, and we don't fucking want strangers around. So we're going to be dismantling that shit pretty soon. And this inn, there is a group already that Scum knows. This guy is described to them as having dark hair and a mustache like a catfish, I think is the way it's said. And immediately Scum and Remez, I think, know who they are. And I just think this is so funny how much they keep running into people that they know. It makes sense, but it's sort of like being in your hometown after you've graduated and gone on to college and stuff, and then you start running into people again. And when they go into this inn, there's a dude that is tied to a pillar inside. And it's this guy named Kaylee, who is one of the rats. And apparently Kaylee is a badass. There is a look to him, and Ciri thinks this later, of somebody who will do anything. Somebody who is very ready to be cruel and fuck shit up. And they are extremely excited about torturing and executing this guy. There is apparently a bounty out on him, and they would have gotten more if they went for his entire gang. But these dudes don't do that. They they get so distracted, and this is their own story. When they sneak up on Kaylee, apparently Kaylee is with his lady friend. Now, I'm not totally sure which one of these lady friends, if she's part of the gang or if she was outside of the gang. But she was with him, and they got so distracted by her and raping her that they missed their chance to potentially just follow Kaylee back to his people and take all of them. And the guy in charge, Verkta, I think, Verkta is insistent that they didn't fuck up, that this is what they wanted to do and how they wanted it to go down. But Scum really believes that they just got led by their dicks and didn't do the professional thing that would have made them the most money and have sort of made fools of themselves. And he also points out, you are sitting here celebrating they aren't going to figure out you've got him and come for him. What are you even doing? And it turns out he is righter than he knows, because he's acting, when he says this, he's saying it in a way he thinks a day or two is going to pass and then his friends are going to, nope, it is that evening. And there is their description of raping this girl, and they don't get into detail with it, but it's really horrifying. These books have never been that explicit when it comes to rape and the threat of it. It's been implied a few times, but it's never been something that I felt totally confident I was reading correctly. There were a few exceptions, but this chapter really deals in the reality of rape during war in a way that the rest of these books haven't felt like they did. Not that it's never touched on. Again, for the one that I keep thinking of, for example, is in the first book that I did for the book club, or the short story book, that Snow White story, and I put that in quotes, there was a good amount of talk in that about rape and sex work, and I think involuntary sex work too, which is rape, but she was being like pimped out by somebody. If I am not mistaken, that is like kind of the most explicit it's gotten. And this chapter in part is really rough because of this being faced the way that it is. And this is what I want people to understand when there is, there's a lot of women especially are voicing their discomfort and frustration with how much rape is used in media as a plot device and as a means of like titillating and shocking the audience. And there are a lot of folks out there who sort of argue that depending on what you're watching, rape is a reality that happens, and it is, especially during certain eras, much more common and treated very differently. And that is not untrue. However, it's all about how you decide to depict that. And, something like Game of Thrones got a lot of my ire because the way that they chose to depict it a lot of the time felt to me actually like they were trying to be titillating with it. It felt voyeuristic and really gross. And then there are times where it's like, The Magicians, which I'm covering, the end of the first season, spoiler alert, there's a rape that is literally used to literally make a female character, quote, stronger. And I mean that in as literal a sense as you can imagine. And that sort of shit I cannot deal. And the reason that I'm not mad at this writer is because he doesn't do this all the fucking time. And when he does it, he doesn't need to get into any detail with it. He doesn't need to make it feel like, there's like some gross glee to it. It's spoken of and sort of like handled like this, and this is what happened in a very bald, sort of matter-of-fact way. And that I can respect. We'll get back to this because this comes up again later. But right now, we have the argument between Verkta and Skamlik, and the way that they decided to handle this. And we fleeced Kaylee of his horse, his pouch, his trinkets, his sword, his saddle, and sheepskin, and we sold everything to the dwarves. We sold his wench's red shoes as well, and her beads. Enough to buy a few rounds indeed. Glad to hear it. Why are you so glad? We've got beer money, not you. All you can do is wipe the snot from your prisoner's nose. The size of the purse reflects the class of prisoner. And he gets pissed, and they're like, we're just kidding. We're going to buy beer and shit. Shut up. Kaylee takes a look at Ciri, and when she looks back at him, she's like, ooh, this guy has an evil face. Like, yikes. And Kaylee starts whispering to her, you are going to have to help me. And she says, I'm not doing that. They are totally going to beat me. And Kaylee said, it says Kaylee's mouth twisted, and Ciri realized that being beaten by Skamlik was by no means the worst thing she might encounter. Although Skamlik was huge and Kaylee thin and bound, she sensed instinctively which of them she ought to fear more. Which really, that says something. Like, I would love to see who they cast for this kid if they were going to make a movie of this, because I don't know who would be as young as Kaylee's supposed to be and still be able to pull off that vibe. So everybody's eating and distracted, and she mentions to the innkeep that she's hungry, and he has to sort of like get approval for feeding her. And Skamlik says no. But Verkta is like, what the fuck is the matter with you? You're out here stuffing your face, you fat ass, but this bitch is like starving and you're just going to let her starve. Cool. And they are like it's funny because they tell also the innkeep that he has to feed the rat or he'll die on the road. And it's pretty clear that like the innkeep is not interested in that. Let's see. Boop. Come and get it, miss. A knife, whispered Ciri, taking the bowl from him. What? A knife, and fast. If it's not enough, take more, said the innkeep unnaturally, sneaking a glance at the diners and putting more groats in the bowl. Be off with you. And she says, a knife. Be off or I'll call them. I can't. They'll burn down the inn. A knife. No. I feel sorry for you, but I can't. You have to understand. No one will get out of here alive. A knife and fast. And when it all starts, get out of here. And finally, he gives her one. He manages to kind of cover it up. But unfortunately, it's not actually enough because this innkeep winds up getting slaughtered anyway. And that's a good indicator of exactly what we're dealing with here. What's happening right now in all of these countries is very akin to Song of Ice and Fire in the middle of the war. You know, we're talking like books 3 and 4 probably primarily, where it's a no man's land and everybody's doing pretty much what they want because there isn't anything organized enough to come down on them. And all of the resources are being put towards fighting this war and nobody's going to try and uphold the law. You know, nobody is worried about that right now. So it's pretty much a free for all. So this dude is waiting for Ciri to cut through his bonds. And as they are working on this, a tree stump comes flying through the window. And then it says, and this is like, because they mentioned that they got the girls like red shoes and beads and stuff. The girl who jumps in here who's all in red, I was like, is this his lady or does it just happen to be red? Close-cropped, fair hair in a red doublet and high, shiny boots reaching above the knee. Crouching on the table, she whirled a sword around her head. One of the Nissers, the slowest, who hadn't managed to get up or jump out of the way, toppled over backwards with the bench, blood spurting from his mutilated throat. The girl rolled nimbly off the table, making room for a boy in a short embroidered sheepskin jacket to jump in through the window. And then they pretty much wreak complete havoc. And she winds up killing the innkeep. I'm pretty sure it's her. The inn was full of uproar and the clanging of swords. Ciri hid behind the post. Missile, shouted Kaylee. Giselair, Reef, over here. So they come around, and I don't know if Missile's the one in the red, but I'm going to say that's probably not his lady then, because I don't think she would fuck him. Just saying. And maybe she was. I don't know. Maybe they called her his lady friend just because she was female, and there wasn't even anything going on between them. But at this point, Scomlick realizes that Ciri could get away in the midst of this, and he starts to come at her. And Ciri goes into Witcher training mode and avoids him very deftly and kind of makes a spectacle of herself that causes the rats later to really speculate on who she could be. And they think that maybe she was like an acrobat with some troupe that was traveling, because it seems like she's able to do these tricks and spins and stuff, but she's not actually up to killing. And yet she manages to kill. It's just that her attitude towards it feels like she's not good at it. It's not like practically she's not good at it. And they wind up getting out of there. And Ciri is with them for long enough that it feels almost like a foregone conclusion that they're going to sort of like adopt her. I love this moment, by the way, where Scomlick is begging for his life and saying, I have children. And Missile kills him and then says, "I can't stand little children." Guys, that is honestly really so funny to me. Like, it's fine. It's great. So they run, and once they finally are able to like slow down and actually talk, they want to know, of course, who Ciri is. They want to know both because these dudes felt she was important enough to take prisoner, and also because she was able to like do this incredible shit when she was fighting. And it seems like Giselher is pretty game to just let Ciri fend for herself. Missile, for her sake, is just like, I'm not interested in just leaving her anywhere. Like, if they find her, they'll just beat the shit out of her until she's dead. And Kaylee finally is like, she helped me escape. Like, I probably wouldn't be here. So I'm going to vouch for her. And they continue on for a while. Like, it's going to be like they're going to accept that she won't tell them who she is, but it doesn't last. They finally start to get really curious again. And Missile is the one that keeps on stepping in and just being like, hey, guys, you need to back off. Like, you're assuming that she like wants to go home again. You don't know she has a home. You're talking like she knows who she even is, and she might not. Who knows what she thinks you are, or me for that matter. So why would she want to talk to us? And finally, Ciri sort of snaps, because they keep on pushing it and theorizing about who she is and where they're going and coming from. The girl, she's got a horse, she's got a sword, she earned both of them fair and square. Let's give her a bit of grub and a few pennies for saving Kaylee, and then let her go where she wants. Let her take care of herself. And Ciri stands up and she says, fine, I don't need you. I didn't ask for anything, and I don't want to stay with you. I'll leave. Where to, if I may ask? What do you care? Screamed Ciri, and her eyes blazed with a green light. Do I ask you where you're going? I couldn't care less, and I don't care about you. You're of no use to me. I can cope. I'll manage by myself. And finally, Giselher is like, hey, listen, even if you do go off on your own, you're not doing it in the middle of the night. Go get some blankets, wrap up, take a nap, and we'll talk about it in the morning. So she goes off to get the blankets, and she turns around, and they are standing all together in a semicircle, and they go through this ritual of inducting her into their gang. And it's an interesting moment because we don't understand exactly why at this moment they choose to do this, but we wind up getting this information a little bit later. And I'll get to it. For now, she gets into bed, and Kaylee tries to wiggle into bed next to her and starts groping her. And Ciri is not interested. And he attempts to say that it's not rape to Missile because this girl didn't cry out for help or do anything to fight him off or say anything at all. And this is one of those things that I wish so much was taught, because I believe Kaylee really believes that in this moment, because guys don't understand. You know what? Not just guys. Plenty of people in general don't understand that some women don't fight when it looks like they're about to be assaulted. They shut down so as to not be hurt during it. Like, they hope that if they make themselves sort of dead weight, that it will be over sooner, because they will not have incurred anger from the person assaulting them, and it will be unpleasant for the person assaulting them, and maybe they will just stop sooner. And there are so many people out there who behave as if not saying explicitly, saying no, stop, get off me, means you were consenting, and it's insane. Like, this is really hard to read because Kaylee is like trying to, quote, seduce her. And Ciri is literally shaking and trying not to cry. And he is super either unaware or uncaring. It could be either way. And she hears all of a sudden a kick. And Kaylee turns over and is like, Missile, what the fuck? And she's like, you disgusting piece of shit, get out of there. And he continues to try and argue with her, and she says, get out of here or I'll cut you. And she pulls her knife. I'm serious. Get lost and join the boys. And we find out later just why Missile is probably so aggressive about this. So Missile gets into bed, and this killed me because I really thought that Missile was just going to lay down and protect Ciri. But instead, she assaults Ciri herself. And it's a weird scene because like Ciri eventually gives in, but it's a give in. It's not like she wanted this. And Ciri starts shaking again. And it says, Ciri felt the iron pincers of revulsion and fear relaxing, releasing their hold. She felt herself slipping from their grip and sinking downwards, deeper and deeper, into a warm and wet well of resignation and helpless submissiveness. A disgusting and humiliatingly pleasant submissiveness. What? So she just got worn down and just let Missile be the one to assault her instead of Kaylee. That's not awesome. I don't really know what to make of this. When Ciri wakes up, she like covers Missile with a blanket and kisses her on the head and thinks to herself that she's not alone anymore. So apparently she's okay with this, but the way it's set up is really uncomfortable and strange and just, blah. It's one of those scenes that a lot of times we as readers will sort of stop and be like, what exactly did the author intend here? And there's a part of me that wonders if this isn't something that like the author either heard about happening to somebody, like, because there are times where you might just write something because this is what happened, because there is a story that you heard that you want to share, and not because you're trying to, quote, say anything in particular. And I don't really know where this falls. But then we get the summary of each of the rats and who they are and where they came from. Misfortune and contempt had brought them together and thrown them onto the bank, the way a river in flood throws and deposits drifting black pieces of wood smoothed by stones onto its banks. Kaylee had woken up in smoke, fire, and blood in a plundered stronghold lying among the corpses of his adoptive parents and siblings. Dragging himself across the corpse-strewn courtyard, he came across Reef. Reef was a soldier from a punitive expedition in which Emperor Emir Var Emrys had sent to crush the rebellion in Ebbing. He was one of the soldiers who had captured and plundered the stronghold after a 2-day siege. Having captured it, Reef's comrades abandoned him, although Reef was still alive. Caring for the wounded was not a custom among the killers of the Nilfgaardian special squads. So this is a trend. At first, Kaylee planned to finish Reef off, but it turns out they're like around the same age and they wind up being buddies. And, we heard earlier that Reef didn't even want to tell some of the others that he had used to be an Nilfgaardian soldier because he knew what they'd think of him, and he hadn't really had much of a choice in being one. So Giselher had deserted from the army. It was probably the army of the Lord of Gesso who had allied himself with the insurgents from Ebbing. Probably. He didn't know where the press gang had dragged him to. He'd been drunk at the time. When he sobered up and received his first thrashing from the drill sergeant, he ran away. At first, he wandered around by himself, but after the Nilfgaardians crushed the insurrectionary confederation, the forests were awash with other deserters and fugitives. And he joins a gang. They like wreak destruction everywhere they go. And he gets pinned to a tree by an arrow at one point, and an elf actually comes to his aid. But he cannot pronounce her very long name, so he just calls her Iskra. The soldier elf was sure to perish should she fail to find a companion. So, yeah, everybody's finding each other in moments of heartache and hardship. And then Missel was a noble girl who was trying to escape the city as a bunch of the the notorious pacifiers of Gamera were heading towards her city, and there was like this mass exodus. But she was very like weak and sheltered and not able to keep up with everybody, and she winds up getting picked up by a group of manhunters who were looking for young virgin girls. And they don't rape her because the fact that she's still virgin makes her more valuable for selling. But those guys wind up getting overtaken and killed by Nilfgaardian marauders, and then she winds up being raped anyway. And it says Missel was the only one to survive. She was pulled out of the ditch where she had been thrown naked, covered in bruises, filth, mud, and congealed blood, by Assi, the son of the village blacksmith who had been hunting the Nilfgaardians for 3 days, insane with the desire for revenge for what the marauders had done to his father, mother, and sisters, which he'd had to watch hidden in a hemp field. So all of them wind up meeting during this like festival for the first time. And it says that it didn't take them long. They had too much in common. They were united by their love of gaudy, colorful, fanciful outfits, stolen trinkets, beautiful horses, and swords, which they didn't even unfasten when they danced. They stood out because of their arrogance and conceit, overconfidence, mocking truculence and impetuousness, and their contempt. They were children of the time of contempt, and they had nothing but contempt for others. For them, only force mattered, skill at wielding weapons which they quickly acquired on the high roads, resoluteness, swift horses, and sharp swords, and companions, comrades, mates, because the one who is alone will perish, from hunger, from the sword, from the arrow, from makeshift peasant clubs, from the noose, or in flames. The one who is alone will perish, stabbed, beaten, or kicked to death, defiled like a toy passed from hand to hand. They met at the festival of the harvest. And Giselher became the leader. They christened themselves the Rats. Someone had called them that, and they took a liking to it. They plundered and murdered, and their cruelty became legendary. At first, the Nilfgaardian prefects ignored them. They were certain that following the example of other gangs, they would quickly fall victim to the massed ranks of furious peasantry. But they were mistaken. The Rats scorned spoils. They attacked, robbed, and killed for entertainment, and they handed out the horses, cattle, grain, forage, salt, wood tar, and cloth stolen from military transports in the villages. They paid tailors and craftsmen handfuls of gold and silver for the things they loved most of all, weapons, costumes, and ornaments. The recipients fed and watered them, put them up, and hid them. Even when whipped raw by the Nilfgaardians and Nissers, they did not betray the rats' hideouts or favored routes. So this is something that, you know, as far as them killing for fun, I won't speak to that, and this just being what they do. But there is a huge factor in gangs in the modern day where gangs will help protect people in neighborhoods that do not enjoy the privilege of real police protection the way a lot of us imagine we do. And they are under no illusions about the fact that they don't have that same sort of protection. So the people who make the money and sort of run things look out for them. And you will hear all the time about drug dealers who were paying the rent for this old woman who was about to get evicted for like 2 years before she died. Or, you know, one of them was getting her groceries every week and had one of his dudes like go shopping and bring her stuff to her house. Like, that sort of thing happens when you are a group of people that has been abandoned by most of society to your own devices because you are not seen as worthy of care the way that the rest of the population is. So it makes total sense to me that this sort of insulates them from being caught. The prefects offered a generous reward, and at the beginning there were people who were tempted, but at night the informers' cottages were set on fire, and the people escaping from the inferno died on the glittering blades of the spectral riders circling in the smoke. The rats attacked like rats, quietly, treacherously, cruelly. The rats adored killing. And there's all these descriptions about the ways in which the rats, like, they tried to catch them. One of the main was trying to instill a traitor within their ranks, but they didn't have any interest in accepting anybody new until they met Ciri. And they can just see in her the way that she screams and how bitter and angry she is, that she is 100% one of them. That she is in a mental headspace where she is fucking over it. Like, everybody has just left her and everybody has just handed her off. And whether or not it was in the same brutal way, like it was with Missile, where it was like assault, it's clear for most of her life that Ciri has not felt like she is her own person. She is a symbol and a mythical figure whom there have been multiple, it seems, prophecies about. And it's what's so gross is, like, we found out it's not even that they're really about her, they're about her son, which really robs her of this agency of even knowing that she's, like, going to have a son, or choosing to do, like, it feels like it's determined already that that's the path that she's going to go down. And the fact that the rats take her in is a shock. The prefect of Amarillo is talking to this other soldier about an attack that he saw and the fact that there were 7 of them. And they don't know what to make of it because, and there is, I'll get there actually. Let me slow down. We had orders to escort one of the Chamberlain Everson's transports heading south. They attacked us by a ruined bridge. One wagon got bogged down, so we unharnessed the horses from another to haul it out. That's when they jumped us. The 7th one caught up with me. A young girl, not much more than a kid. I thought the rats had left her at the back because she was young and inexperienced. The prefect's guest slipped out of the shadow from where he had been sitting. It was a girl. What did she look like? Fair-haired, and he says, it was as if I was striking an apparition or a wraith. I don't know how the she-devil did it. I had my guard up, but she struck through it right in the kisser. And the prefect turns to his guest and is just like, well, you see, we've got so much going on. We don't have the manpower to keep searching for this girl that you're looking for. And it says, enough, said Stefan Skellen, pursing his lips. I know what your belly aching is meant to achieve, but no one will release you from your orders. We've been looking for 3 weeks without really knowing who we're looking for. That wench, the one riding with the rats? Tawny Owl waved a hand dismissively, trying to make the gesture and facial expression appear convincing. So clearly, I've met Tawny Owl before because I remember the name, but I cannot place who this is. So help me out. Sorry, guys. But clearly Skellen is like saying, well, just go and kill all 7 of them. You need to, like, zero in on these rats. Stop letting them get away with shit and just hang them and don't make a big fucking deal out of it. And the prefect's like, well, I can keep the 7th girl alive. And Tawny Owl is like, no. Kill all 7 of them. We don't want to hear any more about them. So I'm not remembering who Tawny Owl is or what he wants. But there's a comment from from Melanie. A lot of fans dislike or disagree over the event with Missile at the end, myself included, so you aren't alone in not knowing how to take this. I should specify the scene with Missile and Ciri, the assault/rape. Yeah, it's weird. It feels almost like the author is trying to imply that Ciri is gay and like was more comfortable with a woman than with a man, but that's not what it feels like to read. I feel like that's kind of what he was attempting there, without really understanding what was actually happening in the scene. But, and you know, it's been mentioned before that Ciri is just really not that interested in boys, and that it's come up a couple of times that she's sort of like whatever about it. So it might make sense that she didn't even know women were an option. And I feel like there has been a hint here and there about like her looking at the, what do you call it? The enchantresses and being much more impressed with their beauty and never really looking at the dudes. So that might be what is happening here, but it's so clearly not consenting and Ciri is not welcoming it that it's very creepy. And just doesn't work the way I think he intended it to work. But yeah, it ends with Tawny Owl saying, hang them, all 7 of them. We don't want to hear any more about them. Not another word. And I'm really curious about, like I said, Ciri's mental health after this whole thing. Like, she's out here just killing for fun now when she almost vomited after killing the other guy. Like, I don't know. It seems like she came after this dude and bashed him in the face and left a permanent scar, but she didn't try to kill him when it seems like she could have. So maybe she's not really totally on board, you know? But yeah, that's the end of the book. So I like this. Ciri's getting to kind of like do her own thing. And granted, it's not like when you are forced to resort to these sorts of situations, it's not super empowering because it's still limited choice. But nevertheless, it's on her own terms to a point, you know? So anyway, guys, I am going to wrap up. Thank you all again very much for listening. Thank you to Melanie for commissioning this and for hanging out in the chat with me. I appreciate it. And I will maybe, I'm not positive actually yet, see you again with another Witcher episode, but I will keep you all posted. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.